A long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away, when nobody else cares, one person, nay, trooper, will celebrate more than a decade of Star Wars, The Force Unleashed.
Hello there, Axelmyth here, and today I'm going to be taking a look at my favorite game series of all time, Star Wars The Force Unleashed. Except I won't be taking a look at just one of the versions of the series. No. I actually kind of like hating myself, I guess. So I'm going to actually take a look at all of the different versions and what they have to offer in terms of differences. I won't be looking at a version of the game if it's like the same. So like I won't be looking at the PS3 version because the same thing as 360. Same thing goes with the PS2 version. Although I really want to play the PS2 version, but the Wii version is just a little more important down the road. Damn it. It's also important to note here that I played the Wii version first. I knew the 360 version on the other side of the fence, and it's even the reason why I wanted a 360 to begin with. It just looks so much better than the Wii version, right? I was able to play it at like friends and neighbors' house, and having that comparison in my head just left me feeling like I missed out on this amazing experience, a better experience. I wanted a piece of that next genness. We didn't get a 360 until 2009-2010, but once we did, I never looked back. And having said that now, I wanted to start with the Wii version first. But as I was writing this review, I kind of just realized that a lot of the comparisons I wanted to make aren't even in the 360 version. So I just kind of thought it would have been just smart to start from the base and then review the add-ons later. Now, getting into this game.
Guys, what if Luke Skywalker turned to the dark side? Then everybody nodded their heads in agreement or something, and after 6 months of chanting kick-ass with the Force Unleashed was born. This game is pretty much a Star Wars hack and slash with some RPG elements, but there are a bunch of different Force powers you have in your hands here, making this game stand out from other games like it at the time. You have Force Lightning, which is pretty useful. Not super powerful, especially at first, but it's good to stop some of the bigger enemies from bullying you. You have the Force Shield, which doesn't last really long, even when it's charged, and I feel like it's only really useful when there's not a bunch of enemies on screen shooting at you from all different directions, because you have to charge it. It only protects you for so long, and the window is just so short. It's not worth using much. But hey, when you swing your saber, it does stun enemies, as it's made of Force Lightning. Later on, you have Force Repulse. This one is a bit more challenging to use in combat. Like the shield, you have to charge it, and for it to do any damage, your enemies have to be pretty close by. Then when you let go of the button, it lets out a giant BOOM! But when there's not many enemies near you, it's not very satisfying. Then you have your typical saber throw and force push. But let me tell you, the force push is so much fun to use here. And damn that sound effect. Like boom, boom, boom! Hey, wait a second. Last but certainly not least, we have the Force Grapple. This is my preferred style of fighting. This ability is just amazing. You pick up your enemies and swing them around, roll them around the floor, or screw it, the ceiling. And they also interact with the environment, so when you get them close to another enemy, they'll grab onto them, and you can pick up 2 of them. Then toss them aside like yesterday's iPhone. I literally cannot get over this ability. The doll physics these guys have is just the icing on top. I did mention that this game had RPG elements. The more enemies you kill, which is pretty much everyone, the more force points you gain, and at some point you level up. I'm not really sure what triggers this. There's not really anything that tells you how many force points until the next level. Leveling up will give you force orbs for different abilities. One is for force powers. This increases the strength of the force powers you possess, and I think it also sucks up less force energy as well. I'm not entirely sure on that one. The next is leveling up Starkiller himself, taking less damage, doing more damage, health, and I think, again, using less force energy, just stuff like that. The last is different combos you can do. Pretty useful, and it makes the lightsaber combat a bit better, as I do feel like the saber combat is the weakest part of the game. One of the combos is actually mandatory for completion though. All of that just makes the game super fun, and with the way the game tells its story, it sort of feels like a realistic looking version of a Tartakovsky Star Wars Clone Wars, where everyone is so overpowered, it's just ridiculous, but it's so awesome at the same time. But what is the story, you may ask? This is a decade-old game, so I don't feel bad about spoilers at all. It starts out about a year or two after the events in Episode 3 Revenge of the Sith. Vader is on the hunt for some Jedi, and there's one on the Wookiee homeworld of Kashyyyk. This is pretty much the tutorial level of the game, trying to figure out the controls and most of the Force abilities, as the more machine than man cannot use Force lightning. Seems pretty right to me. After beating said Jedi, Vader remarks how he senses somebody more powerful nearby, and then finds a boy, the Jedi's son. After killing some stormtroopers to protect the boy, Vader takes him in and trains him in the ways of the dark side. About a decade later, Starkiller is pretty much finishing what Darth Vader started. His job is pretty much to hunt down remaining Jedi in preparation to assist Vader to destroy the Emperor. He meets up with his companion droid Proxy, a shape-shifting droid whose sole purpose is to kill Starkiller. He ends up being so endearing, he talks to Starkiller like a best friend, but then casually mentions that he'll kill him, or Proxy just flat out apologizing for not offing him this time. He also meets his 8th pilot, Juno Eclipse, and right off the bat we can tell he has kind of a crush on her. He asks Proxy for some background detail on her, much like a child in a playground would, like, shh, don't tell her I like her. The trio are sent to find a Jedi named Rom Koda, a Jedi who survived Order 66 because he didn't have anything to do with the clone army. This is technically the first level, but personally I always count Kashyyyk as level 1, because there's literally a tutorial inside the menus of this game. You don't start out with very much, pretty much just force push, grapple, and lightning. This is also where we're introduced to holocrons, but I'll talk about those later. At the end of every stage, there's some sort of boss battle. This stage is Rom Koda himself, and this is the easiest boss in the game. After Starkiller defeats Koda, he tells Starkiller that Vader will not always be his master. He senses only himself in the Sith's future. Then we're sent to Raxus Prime to defeat Kazdan Barabbas, an ex-Jedi who's very crazy. This dude literally made a full-size replica of the Jedi Temple out of trash. It's not that important to the overall plot, but this game sort of starts out as mini-adventures to get you used to the controls and stuff. Vader is still not impressed and sends Starkiller out to find one more Jedi. Jedi Master Shaak Ti on Felucia. Shaak Ti and her apprentice Maris Brood feel the dark presence of the antagonist that we're playing, and Shaak Ti sends her apprentice off to fight another day, as the Sith approaches. They fight until the death when Shaak Ti tells him that the Sith will always betray one another, and thinks he will find out soon enough. She falls backwards, leaving Starkiller bewildered. It cannot be understated how important this interaction is to the entire plot of this game and the character's motivations. After this, Vader calls Starkiller back, and it's time for them to strike now. Starkiller is finally ready to take on the Emperor. The Emperor enters the room and Vader strikes down Starkiller, mostly only to the shock of Starkiller himself. The Emperor tells Vader to prove his loyalty by disposing of his secret apprentice. Vader complies, sending Starkiller out the window. The Emperor seems to buy this, and Vader sends a droid to pick up his apprentice. An unspecific amount of time later, Starkiller is now in an Imperial medical facility. Apparently another secret one or something. But this one is also heading straight towards a star. Vader informs us of our next mission: find the Emperor's enemies and round them up to create a rebellion. Sounds really dumb on his part. This is where level 5 starts, and despite the fact that there's literally a sun out the window, there's actually no time limit, but we're basically here to save Juno Eclipse and book it out of here. Juno's unaware that Starkiller is still a liege to Vader, and he wants to keep it that way. He thinks learning other methods of the Force is a good idea, and that leads them somehow to Cloud City to Rom Koda again. This time, he's looking really rough and drunk. Apparently Jedi do not take it well to losing their eyesight. It's at this stage you start seeing a particular character who's not even a part of the main plot, but is sort of a reoccurring villain in this game, the Shadow Guard. He's sort of a boss battle when they have no idea who the boss should be. He also works as a mini-boss sometimes. It's just kind of funny. So we recruited Koda as our master, and it's on to gather the Emperor's enemies. Our first stop is Kashyyyk to save Princess Leia from the Empire. They took her because her father, Bail Organa, kept speaking out against the Empire. This is the stage when the game starts getting harder. They already introduced a certain metallic enemy before, but they really stack them on this stage. Then after we rescue Princess Leia, she will help us. If we free the Wookiees. Literally, even Juno's like, can I convince you not to do this? And then we get a modified AT-AT boss battle at the end of the stage. Apparently this dude is a giant sports hunter and is generally a jerk. Very prejudiced against Jedi. After I died to that thing and his minions about 10 times, it's time to finally go find Bail Organa, who went to Felucia after Kodo refused to help him get his daughter back from the Empire. Dude's blind. What's he gonna do? To the game dev's credit, even though it's supposed to be around the same area as level 4, Felucia's totally different stage this time around. The level design's different, even the aesthetics have changed, and it all seems a tad bit darker. The boss in this stage is Barriss Brood, Shaak Ti's apprentice from earlier. She's corrupted by the dark side of this place and starts going a bit crazy, but after defeating her, she promises to leave and never come back, never to be seen in another piece of Star Wars media again. That I know of, at least. Bail drops an Anakin reference, and he makes a plan with Kodo and Starkiller. Bail is supposed to go get other senators who hate the Empire, and we're supposed to go make a major strike against the Empire. Starkiller contacts Vader for guidance on this one, and that's when Juno figures out this entire thing. She's not too happy about it either, and they have a little lover spat.
Please, don't make me leave another life behind.
Now it's time to go back to Raxus Prime for the semi-final stage. As before, this stage is also different and is actually pretty challenging. The important story element in this one is Proxy noticing his Chance tries to kill you and acts as the stage's boss. It's a really neat sort of boss rush where you also fight him as Darth Maul and some of the other Jedi that you've already fought. I honestly didn't find this boss too hard, but it was still pretty cool. But the most notable thing about this stage is after you beat the boss, the stage goes on for a bit longer. This is also a stage where the super iconic Star Destroyer scene is. So cool. And now the time has come. All of the Emperor's enemies have been brought to one place, and it's time for an alliance. One that will be known throughout the ages. That is until Vader comes, messes everything up, kidnapping all the senators, Kodo, and almost killing Starkiller again. This time Juno saves him, and Starkiller realizes that he's been duped. This was Vader and the Emperor's plan all along. After a bit of Jedi meditating, he sees a vision of a space station out in the middle of nowhere. The Death Star. When I was younger, this was my favorite stage, mostly because of the giant open area at the end. As an adult, this is still my favorite stage, but I think it has more to do with the stage look itself than anything else. Like the rest of the game, it's really linear, and nothing super noteworthy happens during the stage story-wise. We make it and have to deal with a few guards before finally entering the hallway to the Emperor's chamber, where we have a final face-off with Darth Vader. As a kid, I remember this battle being more aggressive, but I was surprised to find out that it's actually not too bad. After this little skirmish and slamming Vader around, you throw him through the door, and after the best line in the game,
you will give me the names of your friends and allies, and then you will die.
It's on to make your final decision. Kill Darth Vader or save your friends. This is the culmination of what you've been building up to. Kill the Emperor or kill your master. If you go for the Emperor, you have a relatively easy boss match because they keep throwing Imperial guards at you. But still can be challenging because the Emperor hits like a truck. But once you defeat him, Starkiller sacrifices himself for his allies and they escape to fight another day and form the Rebel Alliance. With your friends Juno and Kodo mourning his loss but remembering the person he was past the darkness that he grew up in. We also find out that bringing all the Emperor's enemies together was the plan all along, meaning Vader's secret apprentice wasn't so secret. However, if you decide to fulfill your vengeance and defeat Vader, you're met with a decently challenged battle. This final fight with the damaged Sith Lord will see the end of Vader himself, with you aligning yourself to the Emperor for a second, only to betray him at the last moment. But you have failed. The Emperor has killed the rebel leaders and your friends, and now you are under his control to do as he wishes, until he can replace you. Such a chilling bad ending, but leads to some very awesome what-if DLC. Though, unfortunately, I will not be talking about those. But I will probably talk about one of them in the next review.
It's about a guy who's raised in darkness, who gets redeemed at the end, sacrificing himself for the entire galaxy for a peace he will never know. I just love these characters, and it really helps that the voice acting is just top-notch in this game.
Coda is sort of like, bringing it into a modern terms, Luke Skywalker from TLJ, and it's really good here. By the end, you feel the connection him and Starkiller have, but only because the way they talk to each other and seem to have respect for one another. One fault of this story is that I don't think there's enough training sequences where Coda trains Starkiller in the ways of the Jedi. Juno is a decent enough character. I always like how she reacts to finding out that we're low-key still working for Darth Vader. I'd have really liked to see her get a bit more of a character arc, though. She seems like just a love interest for the main character. That's not to say their chemistry doesn't work here, but I do wish they did a little more with her. Starkiller is a blank slate pretty much. His character arc is a really cool one, though not really original these days. For its time, it was awesome to see this bad guy with a heart of gold. Though, it's not without its faults. I do think they could have gone a little deeper into his character and his psychology. And then there's Darth Vader. I won't say this develops Darth Vader's character in any way, because it doesn't. But I do like how they executed his character. Pun not intended. Seriously, what really makes this game's story work can be summed up in what Chak T said. The Sith always betray one another. You don't know whether or not Vader will betray Starkiller, the one he raised from childhood, or the Emperor, his former surrogate father figure.
Vader had me convinced as a 12-year-old boy that he was actually doing this to kill the Emperor and take his place. Even knowing how the story was going to end. That's how good this was.
Once you defeat the game and start a new one, the cutscene will play from the first level as normal, but during gameplay you are given new costumes for beating the game. For the light side, there's some cool looking Jedi robes that apparently are supposed to be some sort of Force Ghost costume, and then the Sith outfit from the dark side ending. Both look really cool, but unfortunately the costumes don't give you any upgrades or benefits, purely for appearance. Which does sort of stink, but I do get it. That mechanic is placed elsewhere. I have somehow gotten this far into the review without mentioning gameplay somehow. As I mentioned before, this is a hack and slash beat 'em up with some platforming. The stage design isn't too terrible. I did notice a few times where I ran into invisible walls that look like wide open areas. I feel like it's also worth mentioning the game isn't perfect. I did notice a few glitches, like this enemy literally hit me through the floor, and then I spent what felt like 10 minutes trying to get out, doing a bunch of different combos of buttons, and it just wouldn't budge. I literally had to reset. As for the hack and slash part, I will fully admit I'm not this type of gamer. I usually find beat 'em ups boring, pretty much mashing one or two buttons, and that pretty much gets the job done. Which is why I said I felt like the lightsaber combat is pretty much the weakest aspect of the gameplay. I know it can get in depth, but I'm just not any good at it, and I've given it a chance, but I've never gotten the hang of accurately doing combos and the like. I much prefer the combat style of Jedi Fallen Order, but I'm not sure how well that would integrate into this game. But that's okay, because you still have all those Force abilities. The enemy types are vast, especially later on, but then it dials it back down to different variants of stormtroopers. And then there are these bastards. I'm serious. These droid-looking stormtroopers gave me so much trouble. You can't use your Force grab powers on them for some reason, nor will the Force push work for diddly crap. Only your lightning really works, but it doesn't drain their health either, so you still have to get close to them. Which wouldn't be a problem, except they have this undefendable grabbing move that ends up draining a bunch of health. It's not like you can take a second and run away either, because they have these missiles that lock onto you. I've tried occupying them by throwing objects for them as a surprise attack, but locking onto them from far away is a crapshoot. These droids are the bane of my existence, and Rise of Skywalker exists.
Anyway,
in each stage, you find these box-shaped objects known as holocrons. There are usually about 15 of them a stage, but some smaller stages actually only have 5. Each of them will carry force orbs to upgrade your stats, lightsaber crystals to change the color and style of your blade, unstable, compressed, and normal. One of them looks like a flaming sword, and the other one pulses up and down the blade. Both are pretty neat effects, but again, it's only really for looks. I will say it's nice that they have so many colors. And then there's the Darksaber. Dude, if you want to go total edgelord. You can also find assist kyber crystals. These are things that give you different benefits, and it's really cool depending on your play style. Like if you're really good at combos, you use one that deals more damage. You use the force an awful lot, well, there's even one that uses less of your force gauge. And only 2 holocrons in this game will have extra costumes for Starkiller. Speaking of which, there are a bunch of hidden costumes in this game. Behind the menus, there's a password screen. These were the days the developers would put these in here. So painstakingly type in the password Sandan, and you have over 32 costumes, including Coda, the Emperor, and just like a bunch of stormtroopers. Like, I know this is only for aesthetics, but I love the fact that you can be a stormtrooper beating the hell out of other stormtroopers. Though usually when you are any other costume, namely a character that actually appears in the story, it won't play cutscenes. Though, that may be a good thing upon replays, because the game doesn't let you skip them at first. It makes sure you at least have some clue as to what is going on in the story. Then it will let you skip. Like, thanks, but I know what I'm doing after I've beaten the game, game! In this version, the cutscenes are pre-rendered, which does make them look good for their time. But it does make it so that whenever you do have a different outfit on, Starkiller will magically be back into the attire he's supposed to be in for that scene. Which is just pretty goofy. The graphics are something I will say have aged poorly. In particular, their mouth movements are just so unnatural and stiff, and most of their walking animations are just super awkward. They went for a more realistic look because that was just the thing to do back then. Though I do feel like most of the textures in the game aren't that bad. Probably the part of the game that's aged best graphics-wise, if I'm being honest. But I do think this game could have aged a bit better had they gone with that 2003 Clone Wars art style. But then again, I wonder if this game would have sold nearly as well had it looked like that. Would it have made the game too childish? I guess who knows. Above all, I'd say this game looked amazing for its time, but just hasn't aged well like many realistic looking games at the time. One general consensus complaint is that this game is just too short, and I totally agree with that. This game starts feeling like it's just getting going, and then before you know it, you're at the final stage at that final battle with Darth Vader, and it's just like, this game probably could have been another couple levels more.
Do I recommend this game for a modern audience? I think yes is in order here. It's not the absolute best game you will ever play in your life, but it's not the absolute worst either. This game is very important to me, and it helped shape the Star Wars fan I am today. So I am a bit biased, but just as Shadows of the Empire shaped a generation of its time, I really feel like this game did the same. This was my Shadows of the Empire. I do hope you'll consider blasting that subscribe button and igniting that bell icon to keep up to date with future parts of this series. And let me know what you think about this game in the comments section down below. This has been Axelmyth, and I'll catch you next time.